The Grand Challenge. In the crystalline spires of the Galactic Academic Council's central complex on Centauri Prime, Dr. Zyra Kvath stood before the assembled council of minds, her iridescent scales shifting with nervous energy. As the lead researcher of xenological studies, she had presented countless findings to this august body, but today felt different. Today, she would have to admit defeat. The object of their collective frustration floated in the center of the chamber, a perfectly smooth cube known as the Cascade. Its surface shimmered with patterns that seemed to shift and change depending on who observed it and from what angle. For 3 centuries, the brightest minds in the galaxy had attempted to decipher its purpose, its meaning, its very nature. All had failed. Esteemed members of the council, Dr. Kvath began, her translator converting her native clicks and whistles into the standard galactic tongue. I regret to report that our latest approach has proven unsuccessful. The words tasted bitter in her mouth. Her team had spent 15 years developing what they believed was a revolutionary new approach to understanding the Cascade. They had failed, just like all the others. The Grand Arbiter, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline matrix, pulsed with a deep blue light that indicated disappointment. That marks the 743rd official attempt to decode the Cascade, it noted. Perhaps it is time we consider the possibility that our civilization, advanced as it is, simply lacks the cognitive framework to comprehend its nature. Dr. Kvath's scales rippled with disagreement. With respect, Grand Arbiter, I believe we are approaching the problem from the wrong direction entirely. Our very methods of analysis may be the barrier to understanding. The chamber hummed with the telepathic murmurs of the assembled scholars. The suggestion that their methods, refined over millennia of scientific advancement, might be flawed was nearly heretical. Yet the Cascade's continued resistance to their efforts demanded new thinking. Explain, commanded the Grand Arbiter. Dr. Kvath activated her neural interface, projecting a series of complex equations into the air around her. We have assumed that the Cascade requires advanced mathematical understanding to decode. We have applied quantum mechanics, temporal dynamics, and even consciousness transfer theories. But what if we are overcomplicating it? What if our very sophistication blinds us to a simpler truth? The council chamber erupted in debate. The idea that simplicity might be the key to the Cascade was almost offensive to beings who had mastered the fundamental forces of the universe. Yet as Dr. Kvath watched the Cascade rotate slowly in its containment field, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something obvious. What do you propose? The Grand Arbiter's tone carried both curiosity and skepticism. I propose we expand our study to include observations of emerging intelligences. Species that haven't yet achieved our level of technological advancement. Perhaps their perspective, unclouded by our assumptions, might reveal something we've overlooked. The suggestion was met with silence, then laughter. The quantum collective of Rigel 7 vibrated with particular amusement. You suggest we might learn something from primitives who haven't even mastered basic spatial folding? Dr. Kvath stood her ground. I suggest that intelligence takes many forms, and our definition may be too narrow. The Cascade has resisted every traditional approach we've tried. Perhaps it's time for something untraditional. The debate raged for days, but in the end, Dr. Kvath's reputation and the council's desperation won out. She was granted permission to establish observation posts on worlds with emerging intelligent species, though most considered it a waste of resources. One of those worlds was a small, blue-green planet in an unremarkable spiral arm of the galaxy. Its inhabitants called it Earth, and they had only recently discovered atomic energy. Dr. Kvath had no way of knowing that this seemingly routine assignment would shake the foundations of galactic science and force her civilization to question everything they thought they knew about intelligence. As she prepared the first observation teams, she reviewed the preliminary data on human civilization. They were a fractious species, prone to conflict, yet capable of remarkable creativity. Their scientific understanding was primitive by galactic standards, but they had a gift for lateral thinking that intrigued her. Perhaps, she mused to herself, watching recordings of human children at play, we need to learn how to think like beginners again. She had no idea just how prophetic those words would prove to be. An unexpected observer. Maya Patel's world changed on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday afternoon. She sat cross-legged in her favorite spot in Mumbai's Nehru Science Center, sketch pad balanced on her knees, drawing what she saw, or rather, what she thought she saw. The air near the physics exhibit had been shimmering strangely all afternoon, like heat waves rising from hot pavement, except the air conditioning was working fine. She'd been coming to the Science Center every Tuesday and Thursday after school for months. Her parents, both software engineers, encouraged her fascination with science, even if they didn't quite understand why their 12-year-old daughter preferred spending time among old exhibits rather than at the mall with her friends. But Maya saw things differently than most people. Where others saw static displays, she saw possibilities, patterns, and questions that needed answering. The shimmer in the air had a pattern too, though she couldn't quite figure it out. She'd filled 3 pages with drawings trying to capture it, each attempt getting closer but still missing something essential. That's when it happened, the shimmer stuttered, like a video buffering, and for just a fraction of a second, Maya saw something impossible. In that brief moment, she saw a creature that looked like a cross between a leopard and a peacock, with iridescent scales and multiple limbs, floating in midair. Then it was gone, leaving Maya blinking and wondering if she'd finally spent too much time staring at physics equations. Dr. Zaira Kvath, watching through the observation field sensors, felt all 4 of her heart stop. The human child had seen through their cloaking field's quantum fluctuation. Not only that, she had been drawing progressively more accurate representations of the field's wave pattern for the past 2 hours. It should have been impossible. The child species hadn't even developed basic quantum theory yet. The Council's protocols were clear: any breach of the observation field required immediate withdrawal and memory modification of any witnesses. But something made Dr. Kvath hesitate. She had been studying humans for months now, and this child was different. The way she saw patterns, the way she approached problems. "I know you're still there," Maya said quietly, adding another line to her sketch. "Your cloaking field has a repeating pattern. It's beautiful, but it's not quite perfect. There's a tiny flutter every 7 seconds, like a heartbeat." Dr. Kvath checked the field readings in shock. The child was right. There was a minimal power fluctuation occurring every 7 seconds, something their own instruments hadn't detected. Making a decision that would either end her career or change the galaxy, she deactivated the cloaking field. Maya looked up at the shimmering alien form and smiled. "Hi," she said, as if talking to floating alien scientists was perfectly normal. "I'm Maya. Your quantum field harmonics are slightly out of phase. Would you like me to show you why?" The next few hours redefined everything Dr. Kvath thought she knew about human intelligence. Maya's understanding of quantum mechanics was completely intuitive. She had no formal training, didn't know the mathematical formulas, and couldn't have explained it in scientific terms. But she could draw it, could see the patterns that even the most advanced galactic sensors missed. "It's like music," Maya explained, sketching rapid diagrams that made Dr. Kvath's scientific mind spin. "Everything has a rhythm, a flow. When something's wrong, it's like a wrong note in a song. You don't need to know music theory to hear when something's off-key." As Maya spoke, Dr. Kvath's neural interface was recording everything, analyzing the child's unique thought processes. The Council would demand her immediate removal from the project for this breach of protocol, but she knew she had stumbled upon something extraordinary. "Maya," she said carefully, her translator converting her words to Hindi, "I would like to show you something. Something that the greatest minds in the galaxy have been trying to understand for centuries." She projected a hologram of the cascade into the air between them. The cube's shifting patterns cast dancing shadows on Maya's fascinated face. "Oh," Maya said softly, her eyes wide with wonder. "It's like a puzzle box my grandmother gave me, but instead of moving pieces, it moves ideas. Can I draw it?" Before Dr. Kvoth could respond, Maya's pencil was flying across her sketch pad, capturing not just the cube's appearance, but something more, something none of their advanced analysis had ever revealed. As she watched the human child work, Dr. Kvoth realized that she would have to face the council sooner rather than later. This breach of protocol would cost her everything she had worked for, but watching Maya's simple pencil reveal secrets that had confounded civilizations, she knew it would be worth it. What she didn't know was that her discovery would soon force the entire galaxy to reconsider what they thought they knew about intelligence, consciousness, and the nature of understanding itself. The Council of Minds was about to learn a lesson in humility from a 12-year-old girl with a sketch pad and a different way of seeing the world. Patterns in chaos. The emergency session of the Galactic Academic Council stretched into its third day. Dr. Kvoth stood in the center of the vast chamber, her scales now a dull gray from exhaustion, as she defended her actions for what felt like the 1000th time. Beside her, seemingly unfazed by the intense scrutiny of the most powerful minds in the galaxy, Maya Patel continued to sketch. "This breach of protocol is unprecedented," thundered the representative of the Silicon Collective, their crystalline form pulsing with angry red light. "The human child must be memory wiped immediately, and Dr. Kvoth must face sanctions." Maya looked up from her drawing. "But then you'd never know why your quantum fields are inefficient," she said matter-of-factly, holding up her latest sketch. "See? You're trying to force the energy to flow in straight lines, but that's not how it wants to move. It's like trying to make a river flow in a straight line. You can do it, but you'll waste a lot of energy fighting the natural pattern." The chamber fell silent. The Silicon Collective's glow shifted to a puzzled blue as they examined Maya's drawing. The simple pencil sketch somehow captured quantum field dynamics in a way their most sophisticated models never had. "Impossible," whispered the Grand Arbiter. "The child has no training in quantum mechanics, no understanding of the mathematical principles involved." "Perhaps," Dr. Kvoth suggested carefully, "that is precisely why she can see what we cannot. We are so bound by our knowledge that we cannot see beyond it." Maya had already moved on to another drawing, this one of the cascade. Her fingers moved with confident strokes, as if she were transcribing something obvious rather than tackling the galaxy's greatest mystery. The council members watched in fascination as patterns emerged on her paper, patterns they had never seen before, despite millennia of study. "The problem," Maya explained, not looking up from her work, "is that you're all trying to solve it like it's a math problem. But it's more like a story. See these patterns here?" She pointed to a series of interlocking symbols on the cascade surface. "They're not equations. They're dancing." "Dancing?" The Quantum Collective of Rigel 7 vibrated with skepticism. "That's absurd. We have analyzed those patterns through every known mathematical framework." "That's the problem," Maya said, adding another layer to her drawing. "You're looking so hard for the complicated answer that you're missing the simple one. It's like when my little brother tries to solve a puzzle by analyzing each piece separately instead of looking at the picture on the box." Dr. Kvoth's scales shifted to a deep blue of sudden understanding. "She's right," she breathed. "We've been so focused on the individual elements that we've missed the larger pattern. The cascade isn't a problem to be solved, it's a story to be read." The council erupted in debate. The very idea that their sophisticated analytical approaches might be inferior to a child's intuitive understanding challenged everything they believed about intelligence and knowledge. Yet they couldn't deny the evidence before them. Maya continued drawing, oblivious to the philosophical crisis she had sparked. Her pencil moved across page after page, revealing patterns within patterns, connections that had eluded the galaxy's greatest minds. She hummed softly as she worked, a simple tune that seemed to follow the same rhythms she was capturing on paper. "Look," she said finally, spreading out her drawings in a circle on the chamber floor. "If you arrange them like this, you can see it's all one big dance. Each pattern flows into the next, like a choreographed sequence. The cascade isn't trying to tell you something, it's trying to show you something." The Grand Arbiter descended from its elevated position, its energy form condensing to examine Maya's drawings more closely. In all my centuries, it said slowly, I have never seen the cascades patterns presented this way. Child, how do you see these connections so clearly? Maya shrugged. I don't try to see them. I just look. Everything's connected if you don't try too hard to figure out how. It's like looking at clouds, sometimes you have to let your eyes relax to see the shapes. Dr. Kvoth watched as understanding dawned across the council chamber. The child's simple approach had revealed something profound not just about the cascade, but about the nature of intelligence itself. They had assumed that greater complexity of thought would lead to greater understanding, but Maya's intuitive grasp of patterns suggested something else entirely. The Grand Arbiter raised itself to its full height, its energy form pulsing with a new frequency. Dr. Kvoth, it proclaimed, your breach of protocol may have led to the most significant discovery in our history. Not just about the cascade, but about the very nature of consciousness and understanding. Maya looked up from her newest sketch, her dark eyes twinkling. Does this mean I can keep drawing? Because I think I know what the cascade is trying to dance next. The council members exchanged glances. They were about to learn that sometimes the greatest wisdom comes not from knowing more, but from being willing to know less, and see more. Breaking convention. In the days that followed, the great halls of the Galactic Academic Council became an unlikely artist's studio. Where once stood holographic displays of complex quantum calculations, Maya's drawings now covered the walls. The council members watched in astonishment as this human child, armed with nothing more than pencils and paper, unraveled mysteries that had confounded their civilizations for centuries. The cascade, floating in its containment field, seemed to respond to Maya's presence. Its patterns shifted and flowed in ways never before recorded, as if finally finding someone who could truly see its dance. Dr. Kvoth had been officially pardoned for her breach of protocol, and now spent her time documenting Maya's unique approach to understanding. Watch this, Maya said one morning, arranging her latest drawings in a spiral pattern on the chamber floor. When you put them in this order, the cascade's patterns aren't just dancing, they're telling a story about creation itself. The Grand Arbiter's energy form pulsed with intense interest. Explain, child. It's like a giant dance of everything, Maya said, adding another sketch to the spiral. See how these patterns here match the way galaxies spin? And these ones look like the way plants grow, or the way water moves, or how atoms dance around each other. It's all the same dance, just at different scales. The Silicon Collective's crystalline form resonated with sudden comprehension. The child is describing fractal patterns in the fundamental structure of reality, but in terms of dance and art rather than mathematics. Because that's what it is, Maya said simply. You've been trying to read it like a book, but it's more like a performance. The cascade isn't telling you how the universe works, it's showing you. Dr. Kvoth watched as Maya continued to work, her small hands moving with confident purpose. The council's most advanced sensors had been modified to record every detail of her process, trying to understand how this young human mind could so easily grasp what their greatest intellects could not. The patterns, Maya explained, starting a new drawing, they're not separate things. They're all part of one big pattern, like how my heartbeat and my breathing and my thinking are all part of being me. The cascade is showing us how everything dances together. The quantum collective of Rigel 7, which had been among the most skeptical of Maya's methods, now hovered near her work in fascination. But how do you see these connections so clearly? Our most advanced pattern recognition systems cannot detect these relationships. Maya looked up from her drawing, her dark eyes serious. Maybe that's the problem. You're trying too hard to see them. It's like when you stare at something for too long and it starts to blur. Sometimes you have to look away to see clearly. As if to demonstrate, she closed her eyes and continued drawing, her pencil moving across the paper with fluid grace. The council members watched in amazement as perfect representations of the cascade's most complex patterns emerged from her blind sketching. Impossible, whispered one of the junior researchers. She's reproducing quantum-level patterns without even looking at them. No, Dr. Kvoth corrected, her scales shimmering with excitement. She's not reproducing them, she's anticipating them. She's not following the patterns, she's dancing with them. The breakthrough came on the 7th day. Maya had arranged all her drawings in a vast mandala pattern on the chamber floor, creating a map of interconnected patterns that spiraled outward from the cascade's central form. As the council members studied her work, the cascade itself began to pulse with new energy. Look! Maya exclaimed, pointing at the floating cube. It's joining the dance. The cascade's patterns, which had puzzled the galaxy's greatest minds for centuries, began to shift and flow in perfect synchronization with Maya's drawings. The chamber filled with gasps of astonishment as the true nature of the ancient artifact finally revealed itself. It's not a puzzle to be solved, Dr. Kvoth announced, her voice filled with wonder. It's a key to understanding the universal dance of creation itself. And it could only be understood by a mind unclouded by preconceptions, a mind that could see the dance without trying to dissect it. The Grand Arbiter's energy form expanded to fill the upper reaches of the chamber. This day marks a fundamental shift in our understanding not just of the cascade, but of intelligence itself. We have spent millennia developing our analytical capabilities, believing that greater complexity of thought would lead to greater understanding. But this child has shown us that true wisdom sometimes lies in the ability to see simplicity within complexity. Maya, meanwhile, had already started a new drawing. There's more, she said excitedly. Now that the cascade knows we can see its dance, it wants to show us how to join in. A new dawn. 1 year after Maya Patel first revealed the true nature of the cascade, the Galactic Academic Council looked very different. Gone were the austere, sterile chambers designed to facilitate pure logical thought. Now the walls danced with swirling patterns, and researchers from across the galaxy worked alongside artists, musicians, and dreamers. Dr. Zaira Kvoth stood at her new podium, her scales shimmering with pride as she addressed the latest gathering of the newly formed Institute of Intuitive Sciences. The chamber was filled with an unprecedented mix of beings, traditional scholars alongside representatives from dozens of primitive species that had once been deemed too underdeveloped for meaningful contact. The past year has taught us more than the previous millennium, she began, her translator now programmed to convey not just words but emotional resonance. We thought we were approaching the pinnacle of understanding, but we were merely trapping ourselves in a maze of our own complexity. The cascade, still floating in its containment field, now pulsed with vibrant energy, its patterns flowing freely and interacting with those who approached it. Young minds from various species sat around it, drawing, singing, dancing, each finding their own way to connect with its rhythms. Maya, now 13, had become something of a legend in galactic academic circles, though she remained remarkably unchanged by her fame. She still preferred her simple pencils and paper to the advanced technological tools the Council had offered her. Currently, she was teaching a group of Silicon Collective younglings how to feel quantum patterns rather than calculate them. The universe, we have learned, Dr. Kvoth continued, speaks in many languages. We had limited ourselves to the language of mathematics and logic, believing it to be superior. But the cascade was trying to teach us something far more fundamental, that understanding comes in many forms, and sometimes the simplest perspective reveals the deepest truths. The Grand Arbiter, whose energy form now flowed in patterns that would have been considered chaotically inefficient a year ago, added its own observation. Our greatest error was not in seeking knowledge, but in believing that knowledge could only come through complexity. The human child showed us that wisdom often lies in seeing the simple patterns that connect all things. Around the chamber, holographic displays showed the practical applications of their new understanding. Quantum field technologies, once cumbersome and energy-intensive, had been redesigned based on Maya's intuitive grasp of natural flow patterns. Space travel had been revolutionized by incorporating principles derived from the way birds soared on air currents. Even the Silicon Collective had redesigned their crystalline forms to follow more organic, flowing patterns. But perhaps our most profound discovery, Dr. Kvath said, her scales shifting to a deep, thoughtful blue, was not about technology or physics at all. It was about the nature of intelligence itself. We had created a hierarchy of consciousness based on technological advancement and computational complexity. The cascade showed us that true intelligence comes in countless forms, each with its own wisdom to share. Maya looked up from her teaching circle, catching Dr. Kvath's eye. She smiled that same simple smile that had first challenged everything the scientist thought she knew about intelligence. The girl had never sought to prove anything or to revolutionize galactic society. She had simply seen what was there, unencumbered by preconceptions about what should be. As we move forward, Dr. Kvath concluded, we do so with a new understanding of our place in the cosmic dance. We are not meant to master it or control it, but to join it, to flow with it, to add our own unique steps to its endless choreography. The chamber filled with a harmonious hum as beings of all forms expressed their agreement in their own ways. The cascade's patterns swirled in joyful response, its mystery now transformed into a continuing dialogue with all who approached it with open minds and hearts. Later that evening, as the formal sessions ended, Dr. Kvath found Maya sitting in her favorite spot, sketching the cascade's ever-changing patterns. "Do you ever get tired of drawing it?" she asked. Maya shook her head, adding another flowing line to her paper. "It's never the same twice. That's what makes it so amazing. It's like the universe is always making up new dances, and all we have to do is watch and learn the steps." Dr. Kvath's scales shifted to match the peaceful patterns flowing across the cascade's surface. "And to think," she said softly, "we spent centuries trying to solve it, when all we really needed to do was dance with it." Maya nodded, starting a new sketch. "Everything's like that, really. The answers are always there, we just have to remember how to see them with fresh eyes." As the galactic night fell, the cascade continued its eternal dance, now joined by countless minds across the galaxy who had learned to see its simple truth, that understanding comes not from knowing more, but from being willing to see anew.